On the edge of the grandest of canyons, there are vistas that you see with your eyes.
Long ways.
And then there's the kind of view that 12-year-old Nathan Reinwald feels from head to timid toe.
I'm getting dizzy.
Here, the slight tug of fear is normal for most,
Oh my goodness.
while others are pulled by a longing to fly.
Expert researchers armed with unwavering curiosity have ventured into its depths, pushing the boundaries of exploration. What they discovered within the labyrinth of rock formations challenges the very foundations of our knowledge. The Grand Canyon, once thought to be a relic of the past, has unveiled a hidden world lost to time. As these audacious scientists decipher the layers of stone, a truth beyond imagination emerges. Let's get into a journey that will reshape our perceptions as we uncover the terrifying discoveries in the Grand Canyon, altering history forever. The rock formations that make up the Grand Canyon are considered to be among the most well-documented and comprehensive on the entire planet. The approximately 200 million to almost 2 billion years that separate the nearly 40 major sedimentary rock strata that can be seen in the Grand Canyon and the surrounding area of Grand Canyon National Park is the age range that these layers span. The majority of them were deposited in warm, shallow seas and in the area close to old sea coasts that have long since disappeared in western North America. There are examples of marine sediments as well as terrestrial sediments, such as lithified dunes from a desert that has since disappeared. There are at least 14 unconformities that are known to exist in the geologic record that can be discovered in the Grand Canyon. The laramide orogeny began approximately 75 million years ago. It was a mountain-building episode that was largely responsible for forming the Rocky Mountains to the east. The uplift of this region began during the laramide orogeny. It is estimated that the Colorado Plateau was raised upwards of 2.2 miles in total. As a consequence of crustal stretching, the neighboring basin and range province that is located to the west began to take shape approximately 18 million years ago. A drainage system that spilled into what is now the lower basin and range region once flowed through what is today the eastern Grand Canyon of the U.S. Around 6 million years ago, when the Gulf of California was first beginning to form, a massive river was able to begin carving its way to the northeast from the Gulf. The new river cut off the drainage from the older river to create the original Colorado River, which in turn initiated the formation of the Grand Canyon. The onset of wetter climates brought on by the ice ages 2 million years ago led to a significant acceleration in the process of the Grand Canyon's excavation, and it was almost exactly as deep as it is today 1.2 million years ago. Lava was spread across the area between 1.8 million and 500,000 years ago as a result of volcanic activity. At least 13 lava dams stopped the flow of the Colorado River, which resulted in the formation of lakes that reached depths of up to 2,000 feet. Because of the end of the most recent ice age and subsequent human activities, the capacity of the Colorado River to carve out the canyon has been significantly diminished. The normal processes of sediment movement and deposition have been disrupted, in particular by dams. To determine whether or if controlled floods caused by the Glen Canyon Dam further upstream have a restorative impact, these floods have been carried out. The region is still susceptible to quakes and other types of erosive and mass wasting phenomena. Sand, mud, silt, and ash were among the sediments that were deposited in a marine basin next to an orogenic belt between about 2.5 and 1.8 billion years ago during the Precambrian time period. There was at least one collision between an island arc and the proto-North American continent that took place between 1.8 and 1.6 billion years ago. As a result of this process of plate tectonics, the marine sediments that were present in the basin were compressed, grafted onto the mainland, and then lifted out of the water. After some time, these rocks were pushed to depths of 19 kilometers below the surface, where they were subjected to intense heat and pressure to transform into metamorphic rock. The Granite Gorge Metamorphic Suite, which is a component of the Vishnu basement rocks, is made up of the metasedimentary Vishnu schist and the metavolcanic Brahma and Rama schists, all of which were created between 1.75 and 1.73 billion years ago. This suite is a product of the metamorphic event that occurred in the Granite Gorge. This is the hard rock that has been uncovered at the bottom of the canyon in the inner gorge. Around 1.7 billion years ago, when the volcanic islands clashed with the mainland, blobs of magma surged from the subduction zone and intruded the Granite Gorge Metamorphic Suite. These plutons underwent a process of slow cooling, which resulted in the formation of the Zoroaster granite. Subsequently, a portion of this granite would be metamorphosed into gneiss. This rock unit is visible as bands of a lighter tint embedded within the darker, garnet-studded Vishnu schist. The intrusion of the granite took place in 3 stages, the first 2 of which took place during the early Vishnu metamorphism period, and the third of which took place approximately 1.4 billion years ago. The third phase was followed by faulting on a huge scale, particularly along faults running north-south, which led to a partial rifting of the continent. The impact approximately increased the thickness of the crust in the Grand Canyon region and caused the continent to spread from the boundary of Wyoming and Colorado into Mexico. It also created the Grand Canyon. As a result of this thickening, the original Masetzal Mountains rose to heights of between 5 and 6 miles in elevation. The subsequent erosion, which lasted for 300 million years, removed a significant portion of the exposed sediments as well as the mountains. Because of this, the extremely tall mountains were transformed into smaller hills that were only a few tens to hundreds of feet in height. During a recent expedition that lasted for 11 days and went down the Grand Canyon, geologists collected evidence in the hopes that it would enable them to see back in time by billions of years. They were successful in determining the age of the puzzling portion of the national landmark by employing a method that is just moderately recent. The Great Unconformity of the Grand Canyon is located in an area of the canyon in which sedimentary rock strata are superimposed over basement rocks that are up to 1.3 billion years old. Researchers have been asking for a long time what took place during the significant amount of time that passed in between. The research endeavor was headed up by Olivia Thurston, who completed her graduate studies at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and is now employed as a postdoctoral researcher at Indiana University. According to her, this void in the rock record has been the subject of discussion for a considerable amount of time. Now that the findings of the team's research have been published in the journal Geology, scientists are one step closer to comprehending what took place in the region that is now known as the Eastern Grand Canyon millions of years ago. According to Thurston, I was aware that they had tried different techniques in the past in order to date the erosion surfaces in the Grand Canyon. When Dr. Carl Karlstrom, a professor at the University of New Mexico, came to visit, he showed us his work, and I said, "Why haven't we used Zircon Helium yet?" While we are discussing the many ages of erosion, it should be noted that not all of the methods at our disposal have been utilized. Karlstrom, who is a co-author of the article and a professor at the University of New Mexico, has been an important player in research pertaining to the Grand Canyon for a number of decades. In addition, he was the tour guide for the group's journey through the Grand Canyon, during which Thurston and 25 other scientists participated, each with their particular area of scientific interest. The purpose of Thurston's trip to the Grand Canyon was to test the reach of a technique known as Zircon Helium thermochronology. This is a method that measures the time at which a mineral cools as it is brought closer to the top by erosion. In order to establish the process by which the mineral zircon cooled, this method examines the proportion of helium to uranium that is contained within it. According to Thurston, the mineral zircon is frequently discovered in the canyon in the form of minute crystals. Her former graduate advisor, William Gunther, who is now a professor of geology at the University of Illinois and one of the other co-authors of the study, was the one who introduced her to the methodology. Gunther has been at the forefront of efforts to broaden the scope of the technique's applicability over deep geologic time. This promising new ZHE thermochronology technique that Dr. Gunther helped pioneer is being tested in Grand Canyon because of the wealth of prior studies by UNM researchers and others, said Karlstrom. The reason for this is that Grand Canyon has a lot of prior studies. It lends credence to the young, less than 6 million years old, and multi-stage canyon carving idea, which is one that we have been promoting for the past 10 years. At the opposite end of the geologic time frame, some 1.2 billion years ago, it lends support to the notion that the Great Unconformity discovered by John Wesley Powell is a composite erosion surface created by many pulses of uplift. You measure the uranium and you measure the helium inside the zircon, and that gives you a date because you know how fast the uranium decays to helium, Gunther said. What Olivia has demonstrated is that this particular technique can describe both a really old event, the erosion that created the Great Unconformity 1.2 billion years ago, and a relatively young event, the actual carving of the canyon itself in the past 6 million years. The procedure is anything from straightforward. Uranium, despite its importance to the investigation, makes the computations more difficult to perform. Zircon is utilized because of its resistance to the deterioration caused by both physical and chemical weathering. Nonetheless, the radiation that is emitted by uranium can harm the crystalline structure of zircon. Because of this radiation damage, the movement of helium around the crystal is altered. If the crystal is hot enough, helium can actively diffuse out of the crystal because it's not actually part of the crystalline structure, said Thurston. Once we get low temperatures, approximately 200 degrees Celsius, we start to retain the helium, and at that point, the clock begins to run, and we can use the ratio of uranium to helium, the parent to the daughter, to determine the amount of time that has passed since it cooled down to this temperature. According to Thurston, zircon deposits deeper below the surface of the Earth, where temperatures are higher, swiftly release helium when the zircon is in that location. When the minerals start the process of exhumation, which is when they are hauled to the surface, they cool down, and this causes the helium to become trapped. When Thurston and her team examine the amount of helium that is trapped within the crystalline structure of the zircon, they are able to calculate when the process of cooling began, as well as when the rock first reached the surface, where it has remained until the present day. It is remarkable that these zircon grains have a memory of their earliest and latest cooling episodes, but less memory of the intervening billion years, says Karlstrom. In terms of better understanding the sensitivity of this new method for reconstructing past, now eroded landscapes, it is remarkable that these zircon grains have a memory of these events. What ties these findings together is the fact that great erosion surfaces that are forming today in the Colorado Plateau and that also beveled the North American continent in the distant past to a flat-lying near sea level continent like Australia is today take place in pulses of continental uplift driven by the ups and downs caused by distant plate tectonic events. According to the findings of Thurston's research, the Great Unconformity in the eastern part of the Grand Canyon underwent the majority of its exhumation and erosion around 1.25 billion to 1.35 billion years ago. This epoch occurs before the breakup of the supercontinent Rodinia, which took place between 550 and 800 million years ago and is considered by some to be the event that caused the unconformity. Their research, on the other hand, suggests that the Great Unconformity is broadly related to the assembly of Rodinia, which took place anywhere between 900 million and 1.3 billion years ago. According to Thurston, despite this, a broader deep-time thermochronology transect across Laurentia is needed to fully understand the multiple mechanisms that contributed to the formation of the Great Unconformity. I think what's exciting for the general public about this study is to think about how unimportant we are in geologic time, said Thurston. I think that's what's going to make this study exciting for the general public. It has been estimated that the rocks in the Grand Canyon date back 1.8 billion years, whereas the age of the Earth herself is 4.5 billion years. When we consider the significance of humanity or the length of its existence in comparison to that of the Earth, that is a really illuminating and humbling viewpoint to take. These findings help us understand that the Cambrian explosion of hard-bodied animal life, the trilobites, and the advance of oceans, called transgression, across North America about 500 million years ago, followed an earlier beveling episode about 1.2 billion years ago. The Great Unconformity and how it formed are hot topics, and these findings help us understand the Cambrian explosion of hard-bodied animal life, the trilobites. These episodes, taken together, retooled and molded this well-known composite erosion surface, Karlstrom continued. Rock deposition. The Grand Canyon's history begins with the formation of the many layers of rock that the canyon runs through. These layers were laid down as the canyon was being formed. When igneous and metamorphic rocks first began to form approximately 2 billion years ago, this is where our tale begins. Rock deposition. The Grand Canyon's history begins with the formation of the many layers of rock that the canyon runs through. These layers were laid down as the canyon was being formed. When igneous and metamorphic rocks first began to form approximately 2 billion years ago, this is where our tale begins. After that, layer upon layer of sedimentary rocks was deposited on top of these basement rocks until the mountain range was complete. The principle of original horizontality is an essential principle. This indicates that each layer of rock was laid down in a horizontal fashion. The rock strata that give the impression of being tilted are likely the result of a geologic process that took place after the rocks were initially deposited. Talking about the findings. In recent times, visitors to Grand Canyon National Park have been treated to an abundance of breathtaking vistas to take in. The Grand Canyon was shrouded in a thick blanket of fog because of an unusual weather pattern that occurred there a week ago, and just a few days ago, researchers found 2 new kinds of scorpion-like life forms in the canyon. The creatures, which are actually 2 species that had not been found before, have been given the name Pseudo Scorpions by aficionados. They were found for the first time between 2005 and 2007, and at that time, people thought that there was nothing exceptional about them. However, a recent rediscovery has opened the door for discussion over the cave in which these 2 similar species were found. The similarities between them point to the existence of a complex food chain, which is much beyond what researchers had previously assumed was even possible in such a small cave. The capacity of these 2 different species to evolve alongside one another has aroused a growing interest in the environment. This is due to the fact that the arachnids share a food source. These newly found critters have a physical appearance that is considerably different from the appearance of typical scorpions. The most obvious distinction is that these pseudo scorpions lack distinctive long tails with pointed ends that are used to transmit poison. Instead, these pseudo scorpions are equipped with venomous barbs on their claws, which they use to temporarily immobilize their target before devouring it. They also don't appear to have any eyes at all, which may be an evolutionary consequence of living in such a dark environment. It is believed that these animals are descended from scorpions that lived in desert environments. Nevertheless, as the distant relatives of these pseudo-scorpions began seeking sanctuary in caves, these animals adapted to their new, more competitive habit. Their principal food sources are the microscopic invertebrates and insects that, in turn, feed on the cricket excrement and the fungus that forms on the cricket feces. The new pseudo-scorpions really attach themselves to larger animals for the purpose of transportation. This symbiotic partnership with larger organisms enables the species to proliferate and flourish in regions that would otherwise be inaccessible to them. In exchange, the organisms consume annoying insects such as ticks, mites, fleas, and other parasites, while they are on their voyage. The cave in which these new species were found is quite small, yet it is home to an astonishing number of different kinds of animals. Within the cave itself is one of the largest cricket roosts in all of northern Arizona, and it also contains the widest variety of cave-adapted arthropods of any cave in the entire Grand Canyon. An expert in taxonomy noticed a difference between the 2 species of animal based on the claws, despite the fact that both animals present a very similar appearance to the untrained eye. This expert carefully examined every aspect of the newly discovered critters in an effort to identify any parallels between the 2 new species of scorpions and other species from all around the world. In the end, it was determined that these new species are in fact freshly discovered. Nevertheless, despite their similar appearances, they are not 2 of the same species. Despite their similarities in appearance, they are not the same species. The first one has thicker legs and a mound on its pincer, whereas the second one just has a much deeper pincer than the first one. Hesperochernus brady-boggy and Tuberochernus coney are the names given to the newly discovered species. These names were chosen in honor of cave exploration supporter Jeff Bradybaugh and entomologist Theodore Cohn, respectively. Another finding: the discovery of fossil footprints in the Grand Canyon is not an exceptionally rare occurrence. The vast expanse of red rock is home to a variety of formations, each of which contains remnants of times gone by that have been carefully preserved. A geology professor made a find which turned out to be more significant than he could have ever thought. What he came across were the oldest vertebrate fossil traces ever uncovered at Grand Canyon National Park, which are approximately 313 million years old. According to a news release from the park that was published this week, geologist Alan Krill, who is from Norway and is currently working as a visiting professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, or UNLV, discovered a boulder in 2016 that was marked with a set of fossil footprints while on a trek with students. In order to pique his colleague Stephen Rowland's interest in the discovery, Krill forwarded him a photograph of the footprints. Rowland is a paleontologist at UNLV. In a report that was published on Wednesday in the journal PLOS1, Rowland and a group of colleagues documented the discovery that they made. These are by far the oldest vertebrate tracks in Grand Canyon, which is known for its abundant fossil tracks, Rowland said in a statement about the fossils. The Grand Canyon is known for its abundant fossil tracks. They are among the oldest tracks on Earth of shelled, egg-laying animals, such as reptiles, and the earliest evidence of vertebrate animals walking in sand dunes. The rocks that contained the fossil tracks was uncovered as a result of the collapse of the cliff. Before Krill brought it to the attention of geologists, it had been sitting in plain view at the side of a path, but for some reason it had gone ignored. According to the findings of the researchers, the footprints depict two different species moving along the slope of a sand dune. The layout of the footprints suggested a particular gait in early animals that scientists were unaware of until they discovered the tracks. It is called a lateral sequence walk, and it is performed by moving the front leg and back leg on one side of the animal simultaneously, alternating with the movement of those legs on the opposite side moving together. Living species of tetrapods, such as dogs and cats for example, routinely use a lateral sequence gait when they walk slowly, Rowland said in a statement. The traces on the Bright Angel Trail provide evidence that this manner of walking was used very early on in the evolution of vertebrate creatures. Before this, we did not have any knowledge of that. Converting the desert view in the Grand Canyon into an InterTribal cultural heritage site. The National Park Service, or NPS, is transforming a popular visitor services area in Grand Canyon National Park into the first InterTribal cultural heritage site. This location will serve as a focal point for Native American life, culture, and interpretation, and will bring attention to the profound and long-standing connections that tribal communities have with the land. The park is now reconstructing the Desert View area, which includes a beautiful viewpoint and visitor center located at the southeast limit of the South Rim. The National Park Foundation, or NPF, the Grand Canyon Conservancy, and other partners are providing funding for this endeavor. The location is transitioning into a cultural heritage place where visitors may learn about the history and culture of the local Native American community. Additionally, the site is providing a new economic opportunity for the 11 tribes who have traditionally been affiliated with the Grand Canyon region. Many tourists' first impressions of the park and their comprehension of the historical and contemporary relationship that local tribes have had with the Grand Canyon will be altered as a result of the partnership between park employees and members of the tribes who live in the Desert View area. Key aspects of this project have been sponsored by the National Park Foundation, or NPF, thanks to the generous financing provided by the project's supporting partner, Pendleton. These aspects include the construction of an orientation area at the main entry to Desert View and upgrades to the infrastructure. The Ancestral Lands crew was made of young adults from Grand Canyon's traditionally connected tribes. While working at the site, they participated in cultural programs and engaged in activities like conservation, preservation, and plant restoration. Additionally, they built linkages to their ancestral homelands. Since 2015, the Grand Canyon has been the host location for identity-based Native American crews. These crews provide Native American children with cultural links to land through the work of Conservation Corps and the development of trade skills and internships. Desert View will be familiarized to guests through NPF's sponsorship of the orientation area, which will play that role. It is constructed with natural materials and photos donated by tribes, together with narratives about indigenous cultures and the landscape. In addition, it will have extra cultural demonstration spaces for usage by people of the respective tribes. After the project is finished, park visitors and tribal members will have additional possibilities to interact with one another, and artists from the local community will be able to share their history and culture with park guests. In addition to activities and displays, the location will hold cultural demonstrations like weaving, pottery, sculpture, jewelry making, and painting. Visitors will also have the opportunity to hear directly from tribal representatives through the use of first voice interpretation. Desert View will also function as a gathering spot for tours and a site where local tribes may provide information to tourists about the opportunities for tourism available on tribal territory. Desert View and its iconic Desert View Watchtower are the first stops for many tourists seeking information about the area and aching for their first sights of the stunning canyon stretching down to the Colorado River far below. Desert View sits at the east entrance of the park, therefore it is the first stop for visitors coming into the park from the east. The new InterTribal heritage site at Desert View will involve parkgoers from all over the country and the world in learning about the region's many cultures and the people who first inhabited the canyon. Desert View regularly receives more than 1 million visitors each year. Participation of associated tribes in the work. The transformation of Desert View has been in the works for over a decade, kicked off by a collaborative group of NPS staff, nonprofit partners, and representatives from the park's 11 traditionally associated tribes: Havasupai, Hopi, Hualapai, Kaibab Band of Paiute Indians, Las Vegas Tribe of Paiute Indians, Moapa Band of Paiute Indians, Navajo Nation, Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, Pueblo of Zuni, San Juan Southern Paiute, and the Yavapai Apache Nation. These indigenous communities have had long-standing ties to the park, predating its inception, and they view the park's resources as essential to their growth as well as their cultural identity. 3 of the federally recognized tribes in the Southwest share borders with the Grand Canyon National Park, while the other tribes have a traditional association with the park's land. As a result, the Grand Canyon holds a great deal of significance for these groups. Plans to support tribal youth employment opportunities at the site and shape how tribes would be visually represented in the area were developed as part of the planning process, which was carried out in close collaboration with the tribes. Tribal perspectives and history were incorporated into the creation of programming and exhibit plans for Desert View. The programming that encourages the selling of handicrafts and tourism on tribal territory would be beneficial to the tribes since it will create jobs and contribute to economic progress. Buildings with historical significance, such as the Desert View Watchtower and a bookshop from the time of the Civilian Conservation Corps, are going to be saved and put to new use by local tribes. This will help revitalize the area and provide an enhanced experience for tourists, with the bookstore acting as a new tribal welcome center. The National Park Service, the National Park Foundation, and a few other organizations, including the Grand Canyon Conservancy, which is the official nonprofit partner of the park, have all played key roles in funding and furthering this first-of-its-kind initiative, which will benefit the park, tribes, and visitors for years to come. And the project offers an example of how a national park may engage with tribal members in the park experience, enrich the site for everybody concerned, and integrate native people so that they can tell their tales, profit tangibly, and continue to be an important part of the land well into the future. That's all for the video today. We will be right back with more such videos. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.